learners, and welcome to Block 3, Unit 4, Part 1 of BSW 044. Today, we shall be understanding the impact of scientific culture and globalization. Now, before I begin, I want to tell you the objective of this session. This session will enable you to become aware of the tragic situations of tribals due to globalization and also to draw hope for Adivasis by ongoing dialogue and democratic process. Now, this session will talk about all these aspects and many more. This session that deals with the impact of science and culture first talks of ethnobotany, an emerging branch of science where tribal lifestyle has significant contribution to make. Then we will talk about the impact that globalization together with science has on the Indian tribal society. Now, you have heard me talk about the word ethnobotany. What exactly is ethnobotany? Since the beginning of civilization, people have used plants as medicine. Yes, plants, and we all know we have all this dadi maa ke nukse for all our ill health and everything. So plants has been an important aspect. So perhaps as early as Neanderthal man, plants were believed to have healing powers. A discussion of human life on this planet would not be complete without a look at the role of plants. A complete record of the many thousands of plant species used for human functioning would fill volumes. Yet, historians have often tended to dismiss plants as less than fundamental in history. In recent years, however, there have been a reawakened scientific interest in the fundamental role plants play in many cultures, including its medicinal purposes, and especially among the tribals, we see a lot of medicinal plants. Now, that is the story of today's ethnobotany. Ethnobotany, if I have to describe, is the study of how people of a particular tribe and region make use of indigenous plants. Ethnobotanists explore how plants are used for such things as food, shelter, medicine, clothing, hunting, and religious ceremonies. Now, what is the task of ethnobotany, you may ask? Well, ethnobotany has its roots in botany, the study of plants. Botany, in turn, originated in part from an interest in finding plants to help fight illness, especially from tribal-dominated areas. In fact, medicine and botany have always had close ties. Many of today's drugs have been derived from plant sources. Pharmacognosy is the study of medicinal and toxic products from natural plant sources. At one time, pharmacologists researching drugs were required to understand the natural plant world, and physicians were schooled in plant-derived remedies. However, as modern medicine and drug research advanced, chemically synthesized drugs replaced plants as the source of most medicinal agents in industrialized countries. Although research in plants sources continued and plants were still used as the basis for some drug development, the dominant interest and resulting research funding shifted to the laboratory. The 1990s has seen a growing shift in interest once more. Plants are re-emerging as a significant source of new pharmaceuticals. Industries are now interested in exploring parts of the world where plant medicine remains the predominant form of dealing with illness. The tribal areas, for example, has an extraordinary diversity of plant species and has been regarded as a treasure trove of medicinal plants. The tropical jungles contain an incredible diverse number of plant species, many still unexplored, many unique and potentially useful as medicinal sources. Scientists have also realized the study of the tribal cultures which inhabit these regions can provide enormously valuable clues in the search for improved health. To uncover the secrets of the rainforest with the help of tribal medicinal practitioners is the challenge of ethnobotanists. And ethnobotany as a field is on the rise, which can hopefully provide better health system based on our traditional and tribal practices. Now, moving on forward, let us understand what is meant by folk medicine. Coming to the Indian science, it is reported that India hopes to popularize the folk medicine of tribals. The government of India has decided to document, validate and popularize folk medicine practices of tribals across the country and even start institutes for their study to save these traditions from extinction. Folk medicine is different from Ayurveda, homeopathy or Unani. These are local medicinal procedures practiced by tribals across India. We are trying to document, digitize and scientifically validate them, said Verghese Samuel, the Joint Secretary, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Due to modern systems of medicine, this health heritage is losing its popularity. Now, the government is also trying to save these good practices through the initiative. The Department of Ayush, and the full form is Ayurveda, Yoga and Naturopathy, Unani, Siddha and Homeopathy of the Government of India is also involved in this project. It is believed that because of folk medicine practices, tribals in India have a very good immune system. If they are getting benefits out of these practices, then there must be something good about this practice. Don't you think so? As a learner, as a person who is watching this video, or as a person who is belonging from the tribal areas, or as a person whose grandparents or great-grandparents have talked about the importance of these medicinal plants, I bet that you are going to believe what I'm saying right now. Now, these age-old traditions should not be lost in the wilderness. Now, research on these practices should be continued and record them accordingly. Now, all the good practices would also be considered for patenting, because once we patent what we discover, it will be in our benefit only. Now, let us talk about the economic and cultural situations of tribals today. The Constitution of India, which came into existence on 26 January 1950, prohibits discrimination on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex or place of birth. This is as per according to Article 50, and it provides the right to equality as per Article 14, to freedom of religion, that is Article 25 to 28, and to culture and education, that is Article 29 and 30. Scheduled tribes are specially affirmed and protected. Now, despite this, and after the largest modern democracy of the world has existed for more than half a century, the struggles for survival of Adivasis for livelihood and existence as peoples have today intensified and spread as never before in history. Now, we talked about understanding the situations of the tribals, the problems faced by and possibilities offered by globalization. So, before we do that, we will begin with a historical analysis of the colonial and pre-colonial times. Now, let us understand during the British domination what happened. Over centuries, the Adivasis have evolved an intricate convivial custodial mode of living. Adivasis belong to their territories, which are the essence of their existence, the abode of the spirits and their dead, and the source of their science, technology, way of life, their religion and culture. Now, back in history, the Adivasis were in effect self-governing First Nations. Now, in general and in most parts of the pre-colonial period, they were notionally part of the unknown frontier of the respective states where the rule of the reign in fact did not extend, and the Adivasis governed themselves outside of the influence of the particular ruler. Now, with the introduction of the alien concept of private property began with the permanent settlement of the British in the year 1793 and the establishment of the zamindari system that conferred control over vast territories including Adivasis territories to designated feudal lords for the purpose of revenue collection by the British. Now, what happened with this? This drastically commenced the forced restructuring of the relationship of Adivasis to their territories as well as the power relationship between Adivasis and others. The predominant external caste-based religion sanctioned and practiced a rigid and highly discriminatory hierarchical ordering with a strong cultural mooring. Now this became the natural basis for the altered perception of Adivasis as the others in determining the social and hence the economic and political space in the emerging larger society, that is the Indian diaspora. Now relegating the Adivasis to the lowest rung in the social ladder was but natural and formed the basis of social and political decision making by the largely upper caste controlled mainstream. The ancient Indian scriptures scripted by the upper caste also further provided legitimacy to this. Now it is definitely sad that the significant role played by the Adivasis in fighting the British is not recognized by the larger India. Now in the early years of colonization, no other community in India offered such heroic resistance to British rule or faced such tragic consequences as did the numerous Adivasis communities of now the Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Orissa and Bengal. Now apart from this domination by Britishers, what else happened? Well, the Adivasis or the tribals were subjugated by religions. Now the subjugated peoples have been relegated to low status and isolated instead of being absorbed by the majority communities. Introduction of capitalism, private property and the creation of a countrywide market broke the traditional tribal and village economy based on use value and hereditary professions. All tribal communities are not alike, and that is what we have learned in so many of the classes that you've heard before. The tribes of Nagaland are different from the tribes of Mizoram, the tribes of Manipur are different from tribes of Tripura and so on and so forth. So they are product of different historical and social condition. Now they belong to 4 different language families and several different racial stocks and religious molds. They have kept themselves apart from feudal states and Brahminical hierarchies for thousands of years. In the Indian epics such as Ramayana, Mahabharata and Puranas, there are many references to interactions and wars between the forest or hill tribes and the Hindus. Now, eminent historians who have done detailed research on the epic Ramayana, that is approximately around 200 BC to 500 BC, have concluded that Lanka, the kingdom of the demonic king Ravana, and Kishkinda, the homeland of the Vanaras depicted as monkeys, were places situated south of Chitrakuta hill and north of Narmada river in middle India. Accordingly, Ravana and his demons were an aboriginal tribe. Most probably the Gonds and the Vanaras, like Hanuman in the epic, belong to the Savara and Korku tribes whose descendants still inhabit the central Indian forest belt. Even today, the Gonds holds Ravana, the villain of Ramayana, in high esteem as a chief. Rama, the hero of Ramayana, is also known for slaughtering the Rakshasa, that is the demons, in the forest. The epic of Mahabharata refers to the death of Krishna at the hands of a Bhil Jaratha. In the ancient scriptures, considered to be sacred by the upper caste, various terms are used depicting Adivasis as almost non-humans. Now the epics of Ramayana and Mahabharata, the Puranas, Samhitas and other so-called sacred books refer to Adivasis as Rakshasa, that is the demons, Vanara or the monkeys, Jambuvan or the boar men, Nag, that is the serpents, and Busundi Kaka, that is the crow, Garuda, that is the king of eagles, etc. In medieval India, what happened is they were called derogatorily as Kola or Villa, Kirata, Nishada, and those who surrendered or were subjugated were termed as Dasa. In English, we call it as slave. And those who refused to accept the bondage of slavery were termed as Dasyu, that is a hostile robber. Now Eklavya, you must have heard of the story of Eklavya. One of the tribal archers was so skillful that the hero of the Aryans, that is Arjuna, could not stand before him. But they assaulted him, cutting his thumb and destroying his ability to fight, and then fashioned a story in which He accepted Drona as his guru and surrendered his thumb as an offering to the master. The renowned writer Maheshwata Devi points out that Adivasi is predated Hinduism and Aryanism, that Shiva was not an Aryan god, and that in the 8th century the tribal forest goddess or harvest goddess was observed and adapted as Shiva's wife. Goddess Kali, the goddess of hunter, had definitely a tribal origin, claims Bijoy, a historian. After the religious subjugation that we heard about, let us understand what led to the tribals being pushed to the periphery. Now, little is known about the relationship between the Adivasis and non-Adivasi communities during the Hindu and Muslim rule. There are stray references to wars and alliances between the Rajput kings and tribal chieftains in Middle India and in the northeast between the Ahom kings of Brahmaputra Valley and the Hill Nagas. They are considered to be Etisudra, meaning lower than the untouchable caste. Now, even today, the upper caste people refer to these people as jungli, a derogatory term meaning those who are like wild animals or people who are living in the forest or uncivilized or subhumans. The Adivasis have few food taboos, rather fluid cultural practices and minimal occupational specialization, while on the other hand, the mainstream population of the plains have extensive food taboos, more rigid cultural practices and considerable caste-based occupational specialization. In the Hindu caste system, the Adivasis have no place. The mainstream society of India has evolved as an agglomeration of thousands of small-scale social groups whose identities within the larger society are preserved by not allowing them to marry outside their social groups. The subjugated groups became caste forced to perform less desirable menial jobs like sweeping, cleaning of excreta, removal of dead bodies, leather works, etc., which are done by the untouchables. Some of the earlier small-scale societies depended on hunting and gathering, and traditional agriculture seemed to have remained outside this process of agglomeration. These are the Adivasis of present day. Their autonomous existence outside the mainstream led to the preservation of the socio-religious and cultural practices, most of them retaining also their distinctive languages. Now, widow burning, enslavement, occupational differentiation, hierarchical social ordering, etc. are generally not there among the tribals. Though they were trade between the Adivasis and the mainstream society, any form of social intercourse was discouraged. Caste India did not consciously attempt to draw them into the orbit of caste society. But in the process of economic, cultural and ecological change, Adivasis have attached themselves to caste groups in a peripheral manner, and the process of detribalization is continuously taking place, and which is an entirely different debate altogether. Now, many of the Hindu communities have absorbed the cultural practices of the Adivasis. Although Hinduism could be seen as one unifying thread running through the country as a whole, it is not homogeneous, but in reality a conglomeration of centuries old tradition and shaped by several religious and social traditions which are more cultural in their essence and including few elements of Adivasi socio-religious culture. Now, Adivasis are not, as a general rule, regarded as unclean by caste Hindus in the same way as Dalits are. Now, there is a difference, but they continue to face prejudice as lesser human, and they are socially distanced and often face violence from society. They are at the lowest point in every economic or socio-economic indicator. Today, the majority of the population regard them as primitive and aim at disseminating them as people, or at best integrating them with the mainstream at the lowest rung in the ladder. Now, why are we talking about mainstreaming of the tribal society? Well, this is, as mentioned, another debate altogether, but then We also know that the tribals have been ignored by the mainstream society. Now, scientific culture and education made available to some tribals have improved their economic situation. Some of the new technologies like radio, mobiles and TVs have also changed their lifestyle and provided them with more information and awareness. Such facilities, along with the constitutional privileges and welfare measures by the government, benefit a certain minority of the Adivasis. Now, these privileges and welfare measures are denied to the majority of the Adivasis, and they are appropriated by more powerful groups in the caste order. Now, the steep increase of scheduled tribes in Maharashtra in real terms by 148% in 2 decades since 1971 is mainly due to questionable inclusion for political gains of a number of economically advanced groups among the backwards in the list of scheduled tribes. Now, the increase in number of scheduled tribes, while it distorts the demographic picture, has more disastrous effects. The real tribes are irretrievably pushed down in the access or claim ladder. Now, with these new entrants cornering the lion's share of both resource and opportunities for education, social and economic advancement. And despite the Bonded Labour Abolition Act of 1976, Adivasis still form a substantial percentage of bonded labour in the country. Now, despite positive political, institutional and financial commitment to tribal development, there is presently a large-scale displacement and biological decline of Adivasi communities, a growing loss of genetic and cultural diversity and destruction of a rich resource base, leading to rising trends of shrinking forests, crumbling fisheries, increasing unemployment, hunger and conflicts. The Adivasis have preserved 90% of the country's biocultural diversity, protecting the polyvalent pre-colonial biodiversity-friendly Indian identity from biocultural pathogens. Excessive and indiscriminate demands of the urban market have reduced Adivasis to raw material collectors and providers. It is definitely a cruel joke that people who can produce some of India's most exquisite handicrafts, who can distinguish hundreds of species of plants and animals, who can survive off the forest, the lands and the streams sustainably with no need to go to the market to buy food, are labelled as unskilled. Now, equally critical are the parts of resistance that many Adivasis areas are displaying. Now, Koel Karo, Bodhghat, in Champali, Bhopalpatnam, Rathongchu, big dams that were proposed by the enlightened planners and which were halted by the mass movement. Such a situation has risen because of the discriminatory and predatory approach of the mainstream society on Adivasis and their territories. The moral legitimacy for the process of internal colonization of Adivasi territories and the deliberate disregard and violation of constitutional protection of scheduled tribes has its basis in the cultural ingrained hierarchical caste social order and consciousness that pervades the entire politico, administrative and judicial system. This pervasive mindset is also a historical construct that got reinforced during colonial and post-colonial India. Now, the term criminal tribe was concocted by the British rulers and entered into the public vocabulary through the Criminal Tribes Act of 1871, under which a list of around 150 community, including Adivasis, were mischievously declared as criminals. Now, though the shameful act itself was repealed in 1952, the spectra of the so-called criminal tribes continued to haunt these denotified tribes. For example, the Sansi, Pardhi, Kanjar, Gujjar, Bawaria, Banjara and others. Now, they are considered as the first natural suspects of all petty and sundry crimes, except that they are now hauled up under the Habitual Offenders Act that replaced the British Act. Now, stereotyping of numerous communities has reinforced past discriminatory attitudes of the dominant mainstream in an institutionalized form. Now, there is a whole history of legislation both during the pre-independence as well as post-independence period, which was supposed to protect the right of the Adivasis. As early as 1879, the Bombay Province Land Revenue Code prohibited transfer of land from a tribal to a non-tribal without the permission of the authorities. Now, the 1908 Chota Nagpur Tenancy Act in Bihar, the 1949 Santhal Pargana Tenancy Act, the 1969 Bihar Scheduled Areas Regulations, the 1955 Rajasthan Tenancy Acts, and so on and so forth, they talk about there are state legislations to protect Adivasi land rights. In Andhra, for example, inquiries on land transfer violation were made in 57,150 cases involving around more than 245,000 acres of land, but only about 28% of lands were restored despite persistent militant struggles. So, while in the case of Kerala, out of a total claim for more than 900 or 9,000 hectares made by more than 8,000 applicants, only 5.5% of the claims have been restored. And this is happening in spite of favorable judicial orders, which the state governments are circumventing by attempting to dismantle the very protective legislation itself. Now, what happens after that? The callous and casual manner with which mainstream India approaches the fulfillment of the constitutional obligations with reference to the tribes, and the persistent attempts by the politico-administrative system to subvert the constitution by deliberate acts of omission and commission, and the enormous judicial tolerance towards this speak volumes on the discriminatory approach that permeates the society with regard to the legal rights of the Adivasis. Now, with this, lots of points to ponder upon and lots of debate for more sessions. I would like to continue with the remaining session in the next class, and I do hope you all understood what I am trying to mention here. Thank you.